Part 1: Dreams in the Fire. The smell of burning paper is something I will never forget. It smells like destroyed futures and broken promises. My name is Chloe. 10 years ago, I lived in a small, depressing town with my strict, cold mother, Martha. I hated my life. I was a very smart girl. I worked incredibly hard every single day. I wanted to escape this poor town. My ultimate dream was to attend Eden University, the most prestigious college in the country. I waited anxiously for my acceptance letter for months. One dark night, I woke up thirsty. I walked quietly down the wooden stairs to the kitchen. I saw a bright, orange light coming from the living room. My mother was standing in front of the hot fireplace. She was throwing thick, expensive envelopes directly into the burning flames. I recognized the golden seal of Eden University immediately. My heart completely stopped. I ran into the room and pushed her away violently. I tried to reach into the hot fire, but it was too late. My beautiful acceptance letters were already turning into black ash. I turned to my mother, screaming in pure horror and confusion. I noticed a stack of papers sitting on the coffee table. I grabbed them quickly. It was an official application for the terrible, cheap community college in our local town. I looked at the bottom of the cheap paper. My mother had perfectly forged my signature. She legally committed me to stay in this miserable town forever. She destroyed my golden ticket to freedom and chained me to her boring, unhappy life. I looked at her face. I expected her to cry or apologize. I expected her to look guilty. But Martha just stared at me with cold, empty eyes. The fire cast scary, dark shadows across her face. She looked like a complete stranger. My mother had intentionally destroyed my biggest dream. She was jealous of my bright future. She wanted to keep me trapped in the dirt with her. The absolute betrayal burned much hotter than the fire in the room. My heart turned completely cold. Part 2: The Bitter Choice. I held the forged community college papers in my shaking hands. I screamed at my mother, demanding a reason for her terrible crime. I told her she was a selfish, evil monster. I wanted her to feel my incredible pain and deep frustration. Martha did not defend herself. She did not raise her voice. She simply crossed her arms and looked at me coldly. "You do not belong in that rich world," she said with a flat, emotionless voice. "You belong here. You must stay with me." Her cold words felt like sharp knives. I looked out the living room window to catch my breath. The street was completely dark. But I noticed a strange, black car parked silently under a distant street lamp. A dark figure was sitting inside, watching our house. My mind jumped to a terrifying conclusion. My mother was completely crazy. She had hired a private investigator to watch me. She wanted to lock me in this house like a prisoner. She wanted to control my entire existence. I refused to be her victim. I ran upstairs to my bedroom and locked the door. I grabbed a large bag and packed all my clothes aggressively. I found a small metal box where my mother kept her emergency cash. I broke it open and took every single dollar inside. I did not feel guilty for stealing her money. She had stolen my entire future. I opened my bedroom window quietly. The cold night wind hit my face. I climbed out onto the old roof and jumped down into the wet grass below. I ran toward the train station without looking back. I made a silent, angry promise to the dark sky. I swore I would become incredibly rich and successful. I promised to return one day just to humiliate her. I wanted to destroy her completely. I left the small town that night. I cut all communication with my mother. I built a massive wall around my heart. I used my deep hatred as fuel to survive in the big city. I thought I was making the smartest choice of my life. Part 3. The Empty Return. 10 years passed incredibly fast. I kept my angry promise perfectly. I became the successful CEO of a major tech company. I wore expensive designer clothes and drove a luxury car. I had absolute power and endless money. I was finally ready for my sweet revenge. I drove my beautiful car back to the small, depressing town. I wanted to park in front of the old wooden house. I wanted my mother to see my massive wealth. I wanted to throw my success directly in her cold, selfish face. I parked the car and walked proudly toward the front door. But the house looked completely wrong. The garden was dead. The windows were covered in thick dust. The wooden porch was rotting. The house looked completely abandoned and forgotten by the world. A quiet, older neighbor walked across the street. She looked at my expensive clothes with sad eyes. "Chloe? Is that you?" the neighbor asked softly. I nodded, demanding to know where Martha was hiding. The neighbor shook her head slowly, looking very uncomfortable. "I am so sorry, Chloe," the neighbor whispered gently. "Martha passed away 6 months ago. She had very severe blood cancer. She died completely alone in that house." The words hit me like a heavy brick. My mother was dead. The grand revenge I planned for 10 years completely vanished into thin air. I felt a strange, confusing emptiness in my chest. I wanted to yell at her. I wanted her to apologize. But you cannot fight a ghost. The victory felt incredibly hollow. The neighbor reached into her pocket. "Martha asked me to give this to you," she said, holding out her hand. She gave me a heavy, strange metal key. She wore this key around her neck every single day. She said you would eventually come back. I stared at the cold metal key in my hand. My mother knew I would return. She waited for me until her final breath. I looked at the dark, silent house. I needed to go inside. I needed to see what she left behind for me. Part 4. The Hidden Safe. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside the dark house. The air smelled like old dust and dried flowers. The furniture was covered with white sheets. The living room looked exactly the same as the night I ran away. The memories flooded my mind. I walked slowly up the stairs to my mother's bedroom. The room was perfectly clean but very empty. I remembered the heavy metal key in my hand. I started searching the room carefully. I looked inside the closets and behind the old paintings on the wall. I noticed a loose wooden board under her heavy bed. I pulled the board away and found a small, dark hole. Hidden inside the floor was a heavy steel safe. I inserted the metal key into the lock. It clicked loudly and the heavy door opened. I expected to find a hidden will, some saved money, or a long letter of apology. I reached inside and pulled out a thick stack of photographs. I brought them to the light near the window. My heart immediately stopped beating in my chest. They were pictures of me, but they were not normal family photos. They were taken 10 years ago, right before I ran away. The pictures were taken secretly from outside my bedroom window. They showed me brushing my hair, changing my clothes, and sleeping in my bed. My hands shook violently. These were the photos of a dangerous, sick stalker. Someone had watched me constantly in the dark. I dug deeper into the safe and found a clear plastic bag. Inside the bag was a long lock of my own dark hair. I felt completely sick to my stomach. I reached into the safe one last time and pulled out a stack of letters. The envelopes were dark red, and they were sealed with heavy black wax. The letters were addressed to me, but they had never been opened. My mother had intercepted these terrible things. She had hidden the stalker's photos and the stolen hair in her personal safe. The dark, hidden reality of my teenage years was slowly revealing itself. I was not safe 10 years ago. I was being actively hunted. Part 5. The Phantom of Eden. I sat on the dusty floor and broke the black wax seal on the first red envelope. I unfolded the thick paper. The handwriting was elegant, but completely terrifying. The letter was filled with sick, obsessive poetry about my beauty and my intelligence. The writer called himself the provider of futures. He described exactly how I smelled and how I breathed when I slept. He was not just watching me from outside. The letters proved that he had secretly entered our house multiple times while we were sleeping. I opened the next letter. The date on the paper was exactly 1 week before my mother burned my college documents. The words on the page made the blood freeze completely in my veins. The stalker revealed his true identity proudly in the dark red ink. "I have prepared your golden path, my sweet Chloe," the letter read. "I have personally ensured your acceptance to Eden University. I am Professor Vance, the Dean of Admissions. You belong to me now. Your new bedroom is waiting in the soundproof basement of my campus home." The horrific truth exploded in my brain. Professor Vance was a famous, powerful man. He visited my high school once to give a speech. I had shaken his hand. He became obsessed with me that day. He used his massive power to manipulate my entire future. The prestigious acceptance letter from Eden University was not a reward for my hard work. It was a carefully designed, deadly trap. Professor Vance approved my application specifically to lure me directly into his private torture chamber on the university campus. The dream was a nightmare. My mother found these letters. She discovered the terrifying truth about the famous professor. She knew the golden ticket to my dream school was actually a one-way ticket to a brutal death. The pieces of the dark puzzle were finally coming together in my mind. I looked at the burned fireplace downstairs. I always believed my mother was a jealous, evil monster trying to destroy my life. I was completely, horribly wrong. The fire was not an act of hatred. It was an act of desperate, ultimate protection. Part 6. The Mother's Shield. I reached into the safe and found a small, worn leather diary. It was my mother's personal journal. I opened the pages frantically. I needed to understand why she never told me the truth. I read her messy handwriting through a curtain of heavy tears. "I wanted the police today," Martha wrote 10 years ago. I showed them the stalker letters. But the police chief laughed at me. Professor Vance is a millionaire. He donates heavily to the police department. The chief told me to go home and stay quiet. My mother was completely helpless. She had no power against a wealthy, respected monster. The diary continued. "Vance sent me a message today. He said if I try to stop Chloe from going to Eden, he will kill us both in our sleep. He has keys to our house." She was trapped in an impossible situation. If she warned me, Vance would kill us. If she let me go to Eden, I would disappear into his soundproof basement forever. I turned the page to the night she burned the letters. The ultimate, super twist was revealed. Chloe is incredibly stubborn and proud, Martha wrote. If I gently ask her to stay, she will definitely go to Eden just to prove me wrong. There is only one way to save her life. I must make her hate me with her entire soul. My mother intentionally played the role of a cruel, jealous villain. She forged the community college papers and burned the Eden letters right in front of my eyes. She knew my rebellious nature perfectly. She knew that absolute anger would force me to run away immediately. She wanted me to steal her money. She wanted me to escape to a random, distant city where Vance could never find me. She deliberately destroyed our relationship to save my life. She acted like a monster so I would fly away from the real devil. She sacrificed her only daughter's love. She accepted my eternal hatred and disgust. She let me walk out the door, knowing I would never call her again. She traded her own happiness to buy my absolute safety. It was the most brilliant, heartbreaking sacrifice imaginable. Part 7. The One Who Stayed. I dropped the leather diary onto the floor. I cried loud, heavy tears that shook my entire body. I had spent 10 years cursing the most heroic woman I had ever known. I punished her memory while she lived a life of absolute, terrifying sacrifice. I picked up the diary to read the final pages. I needed to know how she survived the last 10 years alone. The words were difficult to read. Her handwriting became very weak and shaky toward the end. The dark reality of her isolation was devastating. Vance was furious when Chloe disappeared, Martha wrote. He came to the house with a gun. I told him Chloe was visiting relatives and would return soon. I have to stay in this house. I must act like I am waiting for her. I must be the decoy. My mother lived alone in the dark house for 10 years to protect my secret location. She absorbed all of Professor Vance's anger and obsession. She kept his dangerous attention completely focused on her, ensuring he never went looking for me in the big city. She was my shield. But the most horrifying revelation was on the very last page. The doctor says I have a rare blood cancer, she wrote. But I know the truth. Vance visits the house when I sleep. He has been slowly putting toxic chemicals in my water for years. He is poisoning me. My mother did not die of a natural illness. The evil professor slowly murdered her in revenge for losing his prize. Martha knew she was being actively poisoned, but she refused to leave the house. She stayed in the trap, accepting a slow, painful death just to keep me safe. She allowed the poison to destroy her body so I could build my beautiful, successful empire. Every dollar I earned was paid for by her immense suffering. She was a true martyr. I hugged her old diary against my chest, wishing I could beg for her forgiveness. The quiet house suddenly felt incredibly cold. I wiped my tears and looked at the dusty bedroom door. The tragedy was complete. But a sudden, chilling sound broke the heavy silence. I heard the unmistakable click of the heavy front door locking from the outside. Part 8. The Devil Awakens. The loud click of the lock echoed through the empty house. The lights in the hallway suddenly flickered and died. The entire house was plunged into deep, terrifying darkness. Someone had cut the main power line. I stood up quickly, my heart hammering violently against my ribs. I heard heavy, slow footsteps walking across the wooden floor downstairs. Someone was inside the house with me. I backed away from the bedroom door, hiding in the dark corner. I desperately hoped it was just a random thief. But deep down, I knew the terrifying truth. Welcome home, Chloe, a smooth, chilling voice called out from the bottom of the stairs. I have waited a very long time for you to return. The voice belonged to an older man. It was confident, arrogant, and filled with dark obsession. It was Professor Vance.